Woohoo! It's Create Day. Hi guys, I'm Linda and this is my assistant Annabelle. Thanks for stopping by to see what we're up to today. On this channel I cover all different types of DIY projects and crafting and thrift flipping, but my absolute favorite is Halloween. Hence the creepy assistant. I absolutely love Halloween and I love the whole creative process of Halloween. I do a haunted house in my garage every year. So a lot goes into that whole process. It's a ton of work, but I absolutely love it. So make sure you subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of this great content. You're going to want to see the summer-filled Halloween extravaganza that takes place around here. It's really a lot of fun and it's worth it. It is absolutely worth it. But in the meantime, we've got spring and summer crafting and thrift flipping to do. So let's go ahead and get started on that. For my first project, I'm giving my metal welcome sign a much needed makeover. I cleaned it up with some degreaser and warm water, and now I'm just applying the paint and primer in a matte black finish. I will also be making those little rain boots to sit next to it. Once that was dry, I went in with my bare chalk paint in a custom color called Farmhouse White. I already had this on hand, so I was happy to have another use for it. I used it to paint my kitchen table and chairs last year. My original plan with this was to distress down through the letters and the edge of the sign to reveal the black, but I ended up going a little bit different direction with it. It took 3 coats to get the coverage that I needed. For my rain boots, I'm giving them a good coat of the Rust-Oleum vinyl spray paint. I had looked into using rain boots as little outdoor planters, and it seemed like a lot of people are having problems with regular spray paint or chalk paint with cracking and chipping. So I thought I'd give this a try, and it actually works really well. It's very pliable and it gives really great coverage. It's just that the color choices are extremely minimal. There was black and there was a spot on the shelf for white, but it was empty. So now we're on to the Easter eggs. They're all going to get a coat of my white chalk paint. I discovered that inserting a bamboo skewer into the bottom hole of the egg really makes it a lot easier for painting and drawing. You can just stick those skewers into a styrofoam block while your egg dries. But I wasn't getting the coverage that I wanted with this sponge brush, so I ended up switching out to just a regular paintbrush, and that worked a whole lot better. So I just give a base coat to all my eggs and let them dry, and then we'll be able to move on to the decoupaging with tissue paper, or actually napkins and fabric. I picked up this set of napkins from Dollar General. They are 2-ply, and I want to use just the top ply that has the pattern on it. So you just separate them. These were really stuck together, but I finally managed to get them apart. And I saved that bottom layer because I'm going to be using it for a stamp to cover another egg. And so now I can just cut out the pieces of the parts of the napkin that I want to use. And you can just tear around the edges so that you don't have a hard line. Just makes it look more natural. But actually the method that I prefer for that is taking a paintbrush, dipping it in water, and tracing around the image you want. And then it just easily tears away. So that's the method I like to use. And there it is. So now we can move on to the decoupaging. Got my Mod Podge. Just spread some over where you think the image will be covering. Stick that on there, smooth it out. You want to make sure that you cover underneath any of the edges that didn't get the Mod Podge. And then go over those edges with the Mod Podge again after you get it all smoothed out. Make sure everything is laying down nice and flat. There's going to be wrinkles, but that's okay. And then you just move on to your next piece. More Mod Podge. Place on your image, smooth it out. And then go around the edges. And once you get all your pieces on, you can apply another layer of Mod Podge over the entire egg. And it will be nice and sealed. There you go. Now here's where I'm going to stamp onto the bottom layer of napkin. I have a cute little bird stamp from Hobby Lobby. And I'm using Stays On ink in Timber Brown. I'm just inking up my stamp. And then we're going to place that on the napkin and press it down. You don't want to press really hard. You can smudge your image. You just want to just firmly press around the entire stamp with your fingers. Pop it off, and there's our cute little image. I ended up making 3 of those so that I could make sure I could cover. I was doing 2 eggs with these, so I wanted to make sure I had enough. And I just used the water method to tear those apart into strips to decoupage onto my eggs. And then it's just the same process. Brushing the Mod Podge onto the egg, applying the napkin, smoothing it down, and going over the edges. I really like this one. It just had a really cute rustic pattern. But I wasn't too particularly thrilled with the stark white. I wanted it to have a little age, so I have the Rust-Oleum it's a glaze. It's different than the wax, but it's an antiquing glaze. And I just use this stencil sponge dauber to swirl on the glaze. Rather than like pouncing like you would with a stencil, I just swirled it and then kind of wiped it off a little bit with a paper towel, just until I got the finish that I was looking for. And that's how that one turned out. Okay, so now I wanted to do a couple of fabric eggs. I found this cute little springtime fabric at the Dollar Tree. It wasn't really Easter related, but it doesn't matter because the colors were what I was looking for. You won't really see what the design is once it's all done. I just cut it into strips and then cut those strips in half again so that they would be about the same length as my egg. And then it was just a matter of applying the Mod Podge and putting the strips on, and then going over them just the same way I did with all the tissue paper. I also did a green fabric and then put white wax over the top of it. And so those turned out pretty good. Super simple. And now my last egg I'm doing is with this ivory colored twine that I picked up from Michael's, I believe. And I'm just adding a little hot glue to the end so it doesn't fray so bad. And then I'm going to attach that with some hot glue to the center of my egg. And you just want to start coiling it around, wrapping it around and adding hot glue where you need it to hold it in place. And I find out here in a second that I really needed to cut that hinge off that was holding the two halves together. Yeah, it was making it really difficult. See there, I finally cut the hinge so I could make this a much easier job. So it's really all you do is just keep wrapping it around and gluing it down. When I started to get towards the bottom of that top half, I got it as close to that seam where you put the two eggs together, and just got it as close to that little lip as I could, and then attached the bottom half of the egg, and then I was able to just continue gluing around that seam that holds the eggs together. So that worked out really well. This one turned out nice. Then at the very bottom, when you get to where there's just a little bit left, you just snip off your twine and tuck it right into the center with some hot glue. And then it's all done. So now I'm going to be painting this little cute bird I picked up at the thrift store. I've already spray painted it matte black, and now I'm adding my chalk paint. Oh, what was the color? Cascade, I believe, is what this color is. And I'm just going to cover the entire bird in this color, and then I'll be adding some white wax after it's dry. This bird had some really cute details on his wings and his little tail feathers, so I was anxious to see how this would turn out. I ended up giving him 3 coats of paint for this. And then I brought in my little Lazy Susan turntable to assist with painting his little head. And I just highly recommend getting one of these if you don't have them. I got mine off of Amazon. It was really inexpensive. But it just has made so many of my projects so much easier. And now I'm going to be making a wood riser for the bird. I have this wood round I picked up at either Michael's or Hobby Lobby, I'm not sure. And I sanded it with just some fine grit sandpaper to kind of smooth out the rough edges. And now I'm applying these wood beads, just with hot glue. This isn't going to get a lot of handling or use or abuse, so I didn't bother to use the wood glue. I just figured the hot glue would be good enough, and it seems to be working just fine. And so now for the edge of that wood round, I wanted to add some air dry clay molds. I have, it's called Regal Trimmings from Redesign is the brand of mold that I got. And I'm just adding some cornstarch with a paintbrush into the mold I'm going to use. That way it makes it really easy to release your mold when you're done. So you just brush some of that in and then shake out the excess. And then just grab your clay and roll it around in your hands to get it all nice and warmed up and pliable. And just press it into your mold. And then I just remove the excess with a artist's knife so that it's nice and flat on the back. Then you just roll your mold over and kind of peel it up, and that little clay mold will pop right out. I needed 2 to cover the entire length of the riser, so I make a second one, same process. And so now we're just going to glue those on with some wood glue. I'm just brushing it on. My wood glue bottle was almost empty, so I just had to get some out from the very bottom, and I just put it on a paper towel so I could grab it with my paintbrush. So now I'm just going to wrap that around, trying to make sure it's flush with the top of the riser. This stuff's really easy to work with. You can press it down firm enough to get it to glue onto something without destroying the image that it makes. I really enjoy working with this air dry clay. So now I'm just going to get the other one glued up. Just lined it up as close as I could get it to that edge. I knew that it will shrink a little bit when it dries, so I didn't want there to be a big gap, but I just don't think you can really avoid that. After it was dry, there was a little bit of a gap that I ended up just taking a little tiny piece of clay and putting it in there so that it wasn't obvious. And after it was all dry, I mean, especially after it was painted, like, you would have to really look for it to see it. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. So now I have all that on there, and I'm just going to set it aside to dry overnight. So now we're back to the sign. I decided to go ahead and paint over the letters with black acrylic paint. The lettering is slightly raised, but it was kind of a rounded raised, if that makes sense. It just was more difficult to paint on without getting it like slopped over on the edges or not getting enough on the top. And I'm not that great at freehand stuff, so it's a little bit of a challenge for me, but it totally turned out just fine. Because after I get all these letters painted, I go ahead and distress the edges of the sign, and then a little bit on the lettering, and then put a clear sealer on it. And then after the clear sealers dry is when we'll go back in and add some waxes. I'm going to do antiquing wax and white wax to really tone down the white and make it look more aged and worn. So here's how it looks after I've distressed and clear coated. Now we're adding the waxes. I started off with the antiquing wax and just kind of brushed it around randomly, wiped it back, and then came in with my white wax to blend it all together. It's really just a process of getting it to just make you smile when you look at it. You know, it's just got to be pleasing to your own eye. There's no right or wrong. You just play with it until you get it about how you want it to look. Once I got all the aging done, I let it dry, and then I buffed it out really well. And then I did give it another coat of the clear sealer after the whole thing was dried. Since it's outside, I mean the wax is a protectant, but I wanted to make sure that since it's outside it had a little extra layer of protection. So I'm still just wiping on, wiping off, mixing, blending. It's really a fun process. It's very relaxing. So now we're back to the rain boots. I'm just adding random polka dots, and I picked out 4 spring colors. And I just took a small stencil dauber, dipped it in the paint, and just pressed it on the boot. I had, there's no rhyme or reason, no pattern. I just tried to get, colors somewhat evenly spaced out, but yeah, I just had fun with it and didn't make it too complicated. Once I had all the polka dots done, I wanted to add a little, almost like a cuff around the top of the boot. And I had this ribbon on hand. Afterwards, I thought it would have been really cute to use an old sock. So if I do this again, that's what I'm gonna do, is play with some more natural looking material. Because I just wanted it to kind of look like there was a sock coming out, folded down over the boot. So anyway, I hot glued the ribbon in half because it was too wide. I needed it to be half that width. And now I'm just finding the center of the ribbon so I can line it up on my boot. And then I'm just gonna hot glue the ribbon onto the boot. Yeah, and also I think when I was doing this, I thought I should have folded it, gone inside the boot and folded it out over the edge. Maybe not with this ribbon, but if I used a different material. So I'm probably definitely going to pick up another pair and experiment with that some more, because I just think it would be so cute if it looked like it was a sock. But anyway, it's ribbon, so I'm just going to glue both sides on, And when I get to the back of the boot with the other end, I actually just fold it under and then glue it down, if that makes sense, so that there's more of a finished edge. See right here. I don't know if you can see it, but I take that raw edge. You might be able to see it if my hand wasn't in the way. I fold that raw edge under and then glue it. And so then I thought it would be cuter if I added some lace. So I found this lace in my stash and decided I thought it would look best if it were on the bottom portion of the boot instead of, I had a couple of different laces and one of them would have covered the entire ribbon. I don't know, I just picked this one. I thought it would look, it just have more dimension to it by not being over the entire boot or entire ribbon. So just get those all hot glued and that boot will be done. And now I'm just going to add some pretty florals to them and they'll be finished. I found these at Hobby Lobby. I thought they were just so pretty. I just bend up the end of the stem and it fits right in there. Now we're back to our little bird. I'm going to apply the white wax. Kind of dip it in there, and I offloaded some onto my plate. And I'm just gonna give him a good coating of this in a circular motion to get in all those little grooves on his wings and his tail feathers. And then you just wipe it back with a dry cloth. And what I'm showing you there is that some of the paint color is coming off with the wax because I forgot to seal the paint before I waxed him. You know, that's what happens. You get in your groove of, you got several projects going and things get missed. But it turned out okay. I put 3 coats on him, so I would have had to really scrub to get through 3 coats. So it ended up being just fine. But do as I say, not as I do. Seal your chalk paint before you wax it. Okay, so now we're back to the little wood riser. I painted it white, and then when I put it next to the bowl that it's going to be sitting next to for my display, it was too white. It needed some age to it. So I ended up taking some of the white and adding French linen, and that wasn't dark enough, so then I added some brown until I finally got the color that I thought would work. A little bit softer, not so bright, just a nice creamy white. painted the entire piece with that. And then I wanted to go in and do my aging. I started with the antique wax in the grooves of the beads around the edging, and then realized, no, I want to start with the clear, wipe it back, and then add the antiquing and wipe it back. So I reversed what I started out doing, and it turned out great. So I wipe on some of the clear, and then wipe that back. And then I can go in with my darker antiquing wax. And then I just wipe that back also. Just adds such nice depth and dimension to this. I love it. And so now I'm adding some of the clear wax to the top, and then I'll be doing the antiquing wax. I didn't like the streakiness of this brush, so I did switch out and just use a cloth to apply it with, but it didn't really make much difference. It turned out all right. I mean, the bird covers it anyway, so. And then I just added a little more of the clear to kind of blend it in. And I repeated the process all the way around the edges and on the bottom. And when I got to the little feet, I actually liked the look of just doing the darker wax and not really wiping it off, letting it actually dry for a little while, and then just buffing it. I like the contrast it gave to this little piece. Well, now we can look and see how everything turned out. Well, that's going to do it for this video. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope I've inspired you to go create something. See you next time.